For someone who owns NFA guns and you don't know what Form 5320.20 is, you're one trip away from a nasty surprise. On November 28, 2025, ATF filed a Federal Register notice to change that form, the one you must file before taking a registered machine gun, short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun, or destructive device across state lines. In this episode, I'm going to challenge you actually to understand the system that claims power over your travel. We'll talk about what moves into ATF eForms, what stays in old-school email, why suppressors live under the National Firearms Act but usually don't touch this particular form, and how the rules still make you wait for approval before you drive. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's about knowing the terrain so you don't lose your rights, your money, or your freedom over a piece of digital paperwork. All right, so now that we've got the big picture from the intro, let's talk about what actually changed, what didn't, and what this means for you if you own NFA guns. What ATF did here is not a new gun control law from Congress, and it's not some emergency rule that came out of nowhere. On November 28, 2025, the Department of Justice and ATF dropped a notice in the Federal Register under the Federal Paperwork Reduction Act. In plain English, they're saying, we want to update how we collect information on one specific form, Form 5320.20, and we're taking public comments until January 27, 2026. That's it. This is all about how they handle the paperwork for moving certain NFA firearms, not about changing the underlying criminal statute. But if you're the one who has to use this system, those procedures are where a lot of your day-to-day freedom either lives or dies. So what is Form 5320.20 in real-world terms? If you own a lawfully registered machine gun, a short-barreled rifle, a short-barreled shotgun, or a destructive device, this is the form you file before that gun leaves your home state. It's the permission slip ATF uses to decide whether your trip to a class, a match, or a new job is authorized across state lines. It's built on top of the National Firearms Act, but it doesn't hit every single NFA item. Silencers are a good example. They are absolutely NFA items. But the good news is that in most cases, you do not need Form 5320.20 just to travel with a suppressor. Same story with a lot of those oddball any other weapons. They're still under the NFA umbrella, but they usually don't go through this specific transport form. That's why it's so important not to stop at this is NFA, but to actually know which NFA rules kick in when you cross a state line with a particular gun. Now, for years, the way you got that permission was painfully old school. You filled out Form 5320.20 with your name, address, the make, model, and serial number of the gun, where you were going, and how long you'd be there. Then you printed it, signed it, and either mailed it to ATF in Martinsburg, West Virginia, or, more recently, scanned it and emailed it in. Email helped a little, but it was still a very manual process on both ends. Somebody at ATF had to open the inbox, pull up your form, read it, punch it into their system, and sign off. You were still left watching the calendar, hoping that approval would come through before your class date or your moving truck. What this new notice does is push the process deeper into the digital world. ATF says Form 5320.20 will be fully fillable on a computer. It can still be sent by email. And this is the big part. They plan to integrate it into ATF eForms. That's the same online platform many of you already use for Form 1S and Form 4S. Instead of just emailing a PDF into a black hole, you'll be entering the information directly into their system, filing it like any other eForm. And in theory, you'll be able to track the status in your account instead of waiting on the mailbox. With that shift, ATF also published some numbers that tell you how they're thinking about this. In the notice, they estimate roughly 12,000 to 13,000 people file Form 5320.20 each year. Under the updated process, they say it should take about a tenth of an hour, roughly 10 minutes, for the average person to complete the form. When they do the math on that, they come up with a total public burden of about 2,151 hours a year. Under the old assumptions, they were working with something closer to 20 minutes per response and a much larger total burden, in the ballpark of 667 hours. The difference is more than 500 hours of paperwork that they say will disappear once this is fully electronic, and the overall number of filers drops a bit. Now, that 10-minute number is important, but it's also easy for viewers to misunderstand. That is just how long they think it takes you to fill the thing out. It is not a promise that you can sit down, click submit, and immediately throw your SBR in the truck. Even in eForms, a human being at ATF still has to review your request and hit approved. Until you see that approval, whether it's an email, a PDF, or a green status in your eForms account, you do not treat that trip as cleared. And when you do get approved, it's smart to print a hard copy or at least save the PDF offline on your phone. If you end up dealing with a local officer who has never heard of Form 5320.20, it's a lot easier to show them a piece of paper than to argue theory on the side of the road. The key thing here is separating the window dressing from the real power. Switching to email and ATF eForms changes how you knock on the door. It doesn't change who owns the lock. Under federal gun law that governs interstate transport of these guns, you still cannot take a registered machine gun, SBR, SPS, or destructive device into another state unless ATF permits you first. And under ATF's own transport rules for NFA firearms, the director only signs off if the trip looks reasonably necessary, doesn't raise public safety concerns, and is legal under the state and local laws where you're headed. None of that changes in this notice. All they did was polish the cage so it runs smoother, while the same people keep holding the keys. All of this, by the way, is sitting on top of the same old National Firearms Act of 1934. That law is still one of the main pillars of federal gun control. If your gun is on that list, machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, silencers, destructive devices, the federal government wants to tax it, register it, and track it. This new move from ATF doesn't touch that foundation at all. It just tweaks how one little corner of the system runs. At the same time, we're living in a very different Second Amendment world than we were in 1934. Modern Supreme Court decisions have made it clear that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right, and that gun laws are supposed to line up with the text and history of the Constitution, not just whatever a legislature happens to feel like trying this session. Some states have leaned into that and expanded ownership of items like suppressors and SBRs. Other states are sprinting in the opposite direction and trying to ban as much as they can. In the middle of all that, ATF is quietly retooling its own machinery so that the same permission structure runs a little smoother and looks a little less like it was built with a typewriter. So, what do you do with all of this if you're a gun owner who actually cares about freedom and also cares about staying legal? First, you treat this change for what it is, a small but real administrative win. If you're going to use Form 5320.20, you'd rather live in a world where you can submit it electronically, check the status in eForms, and not lose days to the postal system. That means keeping an eye on ATF as they roll out the updated form, watching for it on the official site and inside eForms, and getting comfortable with the new workflow before you're staring down a hard deadline like a moving date or a paid-up training class. Second, you stay disciplined about the parts that did not change. Before you load an NFA firearm into the car for an interstate trip, you double-check two things: you've got federal authorization in place, and the state you're headed to actually allows that kind of gun. If you're crossing multiple states, you look at each one on your route. If the trip is a permanent move, you remember that once you settle in, you may also need to update the registered address for that NFA firearm, not just file the travel form. And if your Form 5320.20 gets denied in eForms, you stop right there and figure out why. Most of the time, it's either a typo on your end, bad dates, bad addresses, or a problem with the laws in the destination state. What you don't do is shrug and go anyway. Finally, if you care about changing more than just the user interface on this system, you use the tools that are in front of you. Right now, ATF is taking public comment on this update. That's your chance to talk their language about burden hours, processing times, and the practical obstacles that keep law-abiding owners from training, competing, or relocating with their own property. Those comments become part of the record they have to answer for the next time they tweak a form or defend a process. Beyond that, you keep supporting the lawsuits and the legislative work aimed at cutting back the NFA itself. We don't give up the argument that a 1930s tax and permission scheme doesn't fit a modern understanding of the Second Amendment. We just recognize that while that fight plays out, real people still have to live under this framework. For them, knowing exactly how the system works and how it just got a little less hostile is part of staying informed, staying effective, and staying free. All right, that's the update on ATF and Form 5320.20. If you own NFA guns or care about the Second Amendment, stay alert, learn the rules, and push to change them. Share this video, drop your experience below, and I'll keep you posted on every move they make that affects you.